Jai Hind, Namaste, welcome to Galp Taru, the Tree of Stories, which is a celebration of Indian folk tales. My name is Ambalika and I am an author and storyteller, and Galp Taru is my special storytelling initiative on the occasion of the 75th year of Indian independence. If you are new to this channel, heartiest welcome, and I invite you to check out all the stories and poems that we already have available, especially the Galp Taru series, which started on 26th January this year. And if you are already a long timer, thank you so much, and so glad you continue to be part of this journey, and I look forward to sharing the excitement with you. It's a week of festivities, especially the weekend, and for people in Northeast, it's Bihu time, so no prizes for guessing where the folktale of this week is coming from. Yes, it's coming from incredible Northeast, especially the state of Assam. Did you know, earlier when we said Assam, we were actually referring to Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh and present-day Assam together. Yes, they were all united, and in fact, they were known as United States of Assam. We do have a US of A in India. But then linguistic divisions happened and the 7 states split. And yet, Assam continues to be a multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multicultural society with one section of the population Sanskritized and the remaining tribalized. The tribal communities comprise of the Boros, Rabhas, Misings, Karbis, Dimasas and the T tribes, meaning people who migrated from regions of Telangana, Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa to work in the tea plantations. Mostly they were forced migrations. Some of them did go back to their hometowns, others chose to stay back and live, and as a result there was a permanent settlement of these people in the tea estates, and collectively they are known today as the tea tribes of Assam. So the Sanskritized population speaks a language that comes under the Indo-Aryan language family, whereas the tribal communities speak languages that come under the Tibeto-Burman family language branch. And that is what makes the Assamese society a true melting pot of culture and languages. Today, we are focusing on the Sanskritized population's language, which means the current day Assamese language. And in this language, folk tales are called Xadhu Kotha, meaning words of the saints, which of course have to be wise. So Xadhu means saint and Kotha means words or conversations that have come from the saints. Needless to say, this means that folk tales in the Assamese society are regarded at a much higher level than elsewhere in India. It enjoys an elevated position, so to say, and it has been used for the purpose of providing moral education and entertainment. Unlike other regions where folktale documentation was led by the work of missionaries and civil servants, in Assam this work was taken up by the natives themselves. Yet there have been a couple of civil servants and missionaries who were instrumental in spreading Assamese folktales, using it for their advantage and documenting it for larger consumption. But the pride of honor goes to the Assamese people themselves. The most notable pioneering work in folktales has been done by what we have come to regard as the brother Grimm of India and the pride of Assam, Lakshmi Nath Bezbaruah. Of course, Assamese people pronounce this name as Nath Bezbaruah, but we will go with Lakshmi Nath Bezbaruah. Nath Bezbaruah's work started during colonial times. In 1911, he came out with the first collection of folk tales and titled it Buriyair Xadhu, meaning Tales from an Old Woman. And in 1912, he came up with a second set, which was titled Kokadeuta Aru Nati Lora, meaning Grandfather and Grandson. Now that's really very interesting, right? It certainly throws up images about This warm family setting with the grandfather cuddling the grandson and telling stories. It might actually make you wonder if it really happens these days. Let me assure you, it does. When my father is in town, my nephew sidles up to him and says, "Kotha, story time." And so, after lunch, they both go to bed, and my father tells him a story at the end of which both of them are fast asleep. And my niece, being older than her nephew, does the smartest thing. She sits away from them, doodling whatever she has been listening to and watching, and so she has both the story and another story of her own to tell as well. Fantastic, isn't it? Probably this is what Bezbaruah also had in mind when he was collating all these folk stories, so that it motivates youngsters to come up with stories of their own. Bezbaruah's intentions behind collecting the folk tales could be understood to be highlighting the challenges faced by the Assamese society and also to bring out the evils that haunt it. But at the same time, by segregating it gender-wise, what he also did was give the Assamese women a separate identity of their own, which, given during those times, was really very significant because it was around that time that finally Indian women were able to come out and openly join the freedom struggle. The predominant theme of Assamese folktales is trickster tales, meaning social and political satires, and the plot involves a lot of food and celebrations, which is like Bihu, because Assamese people have got only 3 festivals, which is like Pogali Bihu, Rongali Bihu, and Kati Bihu. And when we talk about food, we are talking about fish preparations, which is majorly Masor Anza and Masor Tenga. So Anza generally refers to the curry made along with the fish, and Tenga is a sweet and sour soup sort of a combination which uses fish and a lot of other condiments. Some of the most common well-known folktales of Assam are Tejimola, Tula Aruteja, Silonir Ziakor Xadhu, meaning the kite mother's daughter's story, and the fourth one is Mekurir Ziakor Xadhu, meaning the cat's daughter's story. One of these is going to be our folk tales. Keep guessing until I reveal it. A quick word on the work done by the missionaries and the civil servants. The American Baptist Mission used to run a fortnightly magazine called Arunodai, and it was mostly an outreach activity to stay connected with the local people. So they would talk about local rhymes, proverbs, riddles, legends, myths, and of course the popular folk tales. Amongst the administrators, the civil servants, was James Drummond Anderson, who was a civil servant in the Bengal region, and in 1895 he compiled a lot of folk tales and came out with a collection, and this was titled Kasari Folk Tales and Rhymes. And shortly after this rather, he quit civil service and went on to become a professor of Bengali language in the University of Cambridge. The other person was Lieutenant Colonel Philip Richard Thornbow Gordon, who, upon the instructions of the Assam administration, came out with a compilation of Assamese proverbs, and it was very simply titled Some Assamese Proverbs. This came out in 1896. Before we move on to the most interesting section, which is revealing the title of the folktale of the week, a quick look into the nature of folktales that is prevalent in the other tribal communities. In the Boros, the folktales are riddle heavy. There's a lot of riddles which dominates their folklore. And amongst the Dimasa community, you will find that it is proverbs heavy, and that is a supernatural element to the stories that they tell. In fact, they take a lot of our Puranic tales and do a retelling of it by putting in their own individual identity about how the Dimasas came from, what their values are, what their beliefs are, what their cultural rituals are, and they do that kind of a retelling, which is really very unique. The Karbi people have a music-heavy folklore. There's a lot of folk songs, and their stories surround myths on creation. The Missing people, on the other hand, do not tell stories for passing information or for the purpose of education. It's just plain delightful for them to tell stories, and so that's why they do it. Another way of looking at these folk tales of Assam are to look at the ones that have originated from the Brahmaputra Valley and the ones that have originated from the Barak Valley. By Barak Valley, we are referring to the regions which are closer to Bengal and present-day Bangladesh. And majority of the population over here speaks Bengali, or you can say that they are of Bengali origin. How that came to be about makes for another extraordinary story, which we will cover sometime in the future. But for now, it's very important for us to know how this has influenced the folk tales that they say. You see, a lot of displacement of the communities happened 200 years ago during the Burmese incursion. So to evade the Burmese invaders, people were trying to flee from their places of origin, and they were all finding out their own unique ways of escape. But eventually, they decided that presenting themselves as Assamese is going to be the safest and surest way to safety. So that's how folktales from the Barak Valley region talk about Assamese identity and staying united. That is where their focus is. Those are the dominant themes. And now we come to the most interesting section of this episode, revealing the title of this week's folktale. Well, it's going to be The Kite's Daughter's Story, also known as The Kite Mother's Daughter's Story. So, as the title suggests, the mother is going to be the bird kite, and her daughter may or may not be a bird. She could be a human being, she could be anything technically. And I'm not going to reveal anything more in this episode. You will have to find that out in the next episode. And so you need to go ahead and hit on that subscribe button and click on that bell notification so that when the story comes live, you don't miss it. I am so excited to bring this story to you because it's like my personal tribute to the state of Assam, and also because in Bihu time, this is the best story because there's a mention of the festival in the story as well. So while I go and prepare that story, you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and bell notification, and I'll see you soon. Till then, Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.